Hey guys, welcome to Did You Get That on Film? On this podcast, we deep dive into horror movies, and so it is full of explicit content as well as spoilers. Please be advised. Now, let's get to the show.
This is Did You Get That on Film, where we discuss characters and terrible situations that we never find ourselves in. I'm your host, DP, and with me is my co-host, someone whose great-grandmother did not pass her daughter for white, thus causing a chain reaction that resulted in the killing of her entire immediate family by a spirit of a disgruntled relative. My friend and soul sister, Ruth.
Hello, everyone. All those things are in fact true. She didn't do that.
Thank God.
But yes, welcome to a brand new episode. So, in case y'all are like, what the hell are y'all talking about? That is insane. Today we are going to be talking about what doesn't get talked about enough. It's Candyman 2, Farewell to the Flesh.
I'm ready on so many levels because it had been a while since we watched it in entirety.
Yeah.
And whole movie slap.
It was nice to see it. Always nice to see New Orleans on the big screen.
I love seeing that skyline. I am always really excited.
Yeah. So Candyman 2, Farewell to the Flesh. This was released in 1995. It was not directed by Bernard Rose, so it has a new director. So it's Bill Condon. It is still starring Tony Todd as Candyman, however, Daniel Robitaille. So it's, of course, a sequel to the 1992 Candyman, which is based on a Clive Barker short story, The Forbidden. And it's the second movie in a trilogy. There's also Candyman 3, Day of the Dead. And then there is a requel, Candyman, that was released in 2021. And we did episodes on Candyman, the first one, and the 2021 version. If you guys haven't heard those episodes, I highly recommend you go back and listen. So we covered Candyman. It was our 10th episode, episode 10, and I think we released it in December 5th, 2023. And then we covered Candyman 2021. That was episode 19, and we released that on February 14th. This is actually going to be the third film in our listener requests month. So thus far, we've already done Hell House LLC Origins, Carmichael Manor. We have also done Thanksgiving. And this particular episode was requested by a podcast, a 321 Ghosts. We love them. So Nat and Kyle, they are avid listeners, and we are avid listeners of their podcast. Thank you so much, guys, for requesting this one. I think Nat specifically requested it, but we love you both, and we highly recommend this podcast. So they're also a horror movie podcast, and if you guys like our content, you'll definitely like them too. If you wanted to find them on social media, it is at 321 Ghost Pod. They are on Instagram. If you could follow them, support them, we would really appreciate that. So we are also going to link them in the episode announcement for this particular episode. But yeah, hi guys. Thank you so much. So yeah, let's just jump right in. The movie opens, so of course this is 3 years after the Candyman murders that took place in the first movie. And we meet Purcell again. So Purcell, who makes an appearance in the first film, he's definitely a professor. I'd want to say he was like a dean at the school where Helen and Bernadette are getting their PhDs. because there's that scene in the first one where they're talking about their thesis, and they were discussing urban legends, and Candyman came up, and Purcell tried to play our girl Helen by saying, like, oh, you didn't come talk to me first, me, the expert on Candyman. But yes, so Purcell has actually taken all of that expert knowledge that he has on Candyman, all of the knowledge that he has on the lore, and he has written a book. So now when we're seeing him, he's actually on a book tour for this new Candyman book that he's written. So he's giving a presentation at a bookstore in New Orleans, and he's telling the audience all about the Candyman lore. And he retells Daniel Robitaille's story, which we learned in the original movie. He was born and he was pretty well educated because, and we say it in the first one, as educated as a African American could be at that time, but his father was pretty wealthy. And so that's how he got to become a painter, and he would travel around in polite society, and that's how he made a living doing paintings for wealthy white people. He ended up falling in love with a wealthy white man's daughter, and he got her pregnant. And because of that, he was hunted down. He was lynched. His hand was cut off, thus where we get the hook. His chest was smeared with honey, and bees were put all over his body. He was severely stung, and then he was set on fire. That is the lore that they established in the first movie. In this one, they don't bring up that he was burned.
He wasn't burned.
But it seems pretty important, though, that he was burned.
Well, in this one, it's not.
Yeah, no. Respect. They had to do what they had to do. I get it. We'll get to all of that. But yeah, so that's the lore that Purcell is kind of laying out right now. So after he retells Danny Robitaille's story, he explains how Candyman's resurrection started kind of as a rumor, and then it kind of grew into a myth, a legend. He also, for some strange fucking reason, tells the group how to summon Candyman, which, okay. So when someone in the audience asks, but is Candyman real? Give it to us straight. Purcell ends up sharing, just like it's a very small bit, but he shares Helen's story. So Helen Lyle from the first movie, Virginia Madsen's character, he says that he believes the myth, but he himself does not personally believe in the flesh and blood Candyman. He kind of attributes things like what happened with Helen to people just getting too caught up in the myth. And so we know that anybody outside of Cabrini Green, they are still under the impression that Helen went crazy and killed all these people herself. And so in Purcell's mind, that's just like further proof that like there is no Candyman, right? She just got too caught up in the story and she went on a murderous rampage. So he feels pretty confident in saying all of these things to this group of naive people. That's when some fucking idiot bitch in the room, she's like, well, prove it if you don't believe in him. So he pulls out his book. Cleverly, his book is reflective, so his book almost looks like a mirror. So he picks up the book. He says Candyman's name 5 times, looking at the book. Nothing happens. Everybody laughs. Then he stands in front of his projector, and a hooked hand breaks through and grabs him. He's screaming. There's audible gasp from everyone in the room. But surprise, surprise, Purcell was just pranking them. So now this whole time, there's been a man standing in the back of the bookstore. We're going to learn that this man is Ethan Tarrant. Ethan ends up lurking outside, kind of waiting for Purcell, and he pops up on him while he's walking down the street, and he asks him to sign a copy of his book. That's when Ethan tells Purcell his name, Ethan Tarrant. Purcell immediately recognizes the name. So apparently Ethan blames Purcell for his father's death because Ethan's father Coleman, Tarrant, went to Purcell for help before he died. Apparently, Ethan's father, who was a police officer, believed that there were some murders that looked suspiciously like they could have been committed by Candyman. But Purcell told him that Candyman was not real. And this is where it gets mad crazy, because he didn't leave it at that. He was basically just like, well, prove it to yourself and just say his name 5 times in the mirror. Which, like, what the fuck? And we talked about this in the first one, where it's one of those situations where it's like, whether you believe it or not, you know, whether you take something like seriously, whether you could believe it could really happen or not, what's the real gain for like fucking around and finding out? Right? Like, what did you gain by doing this? It could have not been done. You know what I mean?
It's beyond my scope of imagination.
You told this man who's coming to you, who's afraid, even if it's not real, he's clearly susceptible to this type of thinking, right? Even if you think that it's kind of some mass hysteria type event, this guy is clearly on this precipice of like going into like, because you think people get too caught up in the myth and then they die like Helen. Why would you suggest that this man go to the mirror and say it 5 times? What did you think that you were going to achieve with that? I'm confusion.
I'm not confusion. I'm disappointed that, from what it seemed, I know that they weren't friends, but like Helen was at least at your contemporary, you know. She was someone who you had dinner with, someone you knew her husband.
He went to the funeral.
You went to her service, so I just feel like...
And you saw all the people from Cabrini Green come
to her service
and pay her their respects. You saw that this baby that she supposedly kidnapped, which set all this in motion, you saw that the mother's holding this baby. You saw them drop this hook in the grave. I guess he just dismissed all of that? As if, like, I guess they're all delusional?
But I just can't believe that, you know, it just seems so off-putting that this character, who I'm not saying that he was the best, he was not a sympathetic character, but he wasn't as, I mean, this is a total asshole now.
Right, yeah. I guess because he had some success with his book? I don't know.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure you took some of her research, because she went to Cabrini and she had those recordings.
Yep.
Those documents.
And we know that those recordings are accessible because we see, not that it's, you know, canon in this particular movie, but she had all that stuff kind of at the university and it's on file at the university. So we know that it's accessible to him, her research.
Her research.
Yeah.
I just thought that it was kind of sad to see that he was so dismissive and quick to add to the story.
And also to be so dismissive of, I guess, the Candyman thing in general. I feel like even if you don't believe it, I don't think it should be laughed at. I don't think it should be played with, because you know that it's very real to a certain population of people. So I don't know. He rubbed me the wrong way. But he does apologize to Ethan, and he says that he has seen other people get sucked into the myth, like Helen. But Ethan isn't having any of that and slaps this book out of Purcell's hands. And Ethan's coming on strong. So Purcell is like, I'm gonna head out. And he just starts walking off. He starts walking away. Because Ethan's kind of giving nutcase vibes, because they're like on a totally desolate street, which isn't a thing in New Orleans ever, but...
Especially during this time of year in the movie is set.
Exactly. But it's totally fucking desolate. There's nobody out there. Ethan is like clearly angry. So Purcell's like half running off to get away from him. But Ethan calls out to him and he's like, no, Candyman is here and you're next, Purcell. Groin to gullet. And I was like, Ethan, chill. Chill. Because you're coming on very, very strong. And it ends up getting him in trouble. Purcell's just like, you're fucking crazy, just like your crazy ass father. in so many words. And he hustles down the street to a bar. Ethan ends up following him and attacks him at the bar. He attacks him from behind, cutting Purcell's face on like a shot glass. He threatens him again, but now in front of everybody, before he's manhandled by the staff and patrons and thrown out of the bar.
Why did the bartender throw him through a glass window?
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mention that. Before he's thrown out of the fucking bar, he's thrown through a window.
But you know what I think about as we're sitting here discussing? You know, it's Mardi Gras. So he's probably like, I am my wits end.
True that. That is so true.
I was trying to track the days, and I was just like, it must be damn near Mardi Gras for the whole movie, pretty much. And he's like, if I have to work another shift, if another person comes here and starts some stuff,
I'm throwing him through a window.
I'm throwing him through a window.
He couldn't wait. Ethan's really, like, not fazed by being thrown through this window.
Adrenaline is pumping.
I guess so. So, Purcell is shook, and he heads to the bathroom to tend to this wound that he just got on his head. And he is a little spooked. There's another patron in the bathroom that he's making very uncomfortable. But then that patron leaves, and the lights end up going out.
Nope.
Why didn't you leave, Purcell? I would have run. I can't even tell you how fast I would have ran out of that bathroom.
Because you didn't even use the bathroom.
No, you just came to like wipe the blood off your face. Do that at the bar, surrounded by people.
Give me a towel real quick.
Okay, yeah, can you just wet a bev nap? No, he's in the bathroom, totally alone and in the dark now. So as the door is swinging from this patron just leaving, he catches a glimpse of Candyman outside of the bathroom door, and he whips around because he's scared as hell. There's nobody there. So he's like, whew, thank God for that. When he turns back to the bathroom mirror, though, Candyman appears behind him, and he just shoves his hook through Purcell's back aggressively. I can't describe it any other way. It's mad hooking. And he leaves him dead on the floor. There's blood everywhere. And that's the first on-screen kill.
And the cold opening.
And the cold opening, yes. Because that's when the opening credits start to roll.
I was like, damn, this is...
That was a really, really good cold opening.
I didn't remember that there was a cold opening like that.
I remembered that Purcell was the first person to die in the movie.
A little like Cotton Weary, you know. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not as dope as, you know, the empty parking lot and like, hello. But it's still a good introduction to the first time you see the character.
I thought the effect with like seeing him at the door, the way the door's swinging, I was like, oh shit. And Purcell was also like, oh shit. And I was like, that was kind of creepy. And then it's like, you don't see him and you think he's gone and you're like, well, surely he's not going to like get killed right now. It's Purcell.
It's Purcell.
Nah.
The opening kill.
Yeah. It was great. I thought it was great.
I did too. I was like, okay, this is dope. I like this.
So then we cut to a parade because there is never going to be a movie that's set in New Orleans that exists without a parade happening.
And it's Mardi Gras, baby.
Yeah. So we get some audio. There's a radio host, and his name's Kingfish, and he's going to be talking through the entire movie. I don't mention every time he talks because, y'all, he's literally like the score to this film. He's always fucking going in the background. So Kingfish is telling us that it is just a couple of days until Mardi Gras. It's a couple of days until Mardi Gras because I think he's saying that it's like 3 days until Ash Wednesday. Ash Wednesday is always the day after Mardi Gras in New Orleans. So Mardi Gras falls on Fat Tuesday, and then there's Ash Wednesday. And so he starts talking about the word carnival, and he's saying the word carnival in Latin means farewell to the flesh. So then we cut to a woman who we're going to learn is Annie Tarrant. It's Ethan's sister. So she's listening to Kingfish on the radio, and he is warning people to not say Candyman's name because there have been a number of murders in the area recently, Candyman type murders, and people are scared. So that's when Annie pulls up to her job. So she's an art teacher at a school named St. Vincent's, and it's clearly supposed to be a school for kind of lower income students.
She got her Michelle Pfeiffer Dangerous Mind Bob going on.
She sure does. The only thing missing is the leather jacket.
And the Coolio single.
Right. So she's working with the kids, having a good time. And that's when the principal comes in. He tells her something has happened with her brother. So she rushes away. She heads to her mother, Octavia's condo. Now, her mother's condo is extremely nice. So it's very clear that they're wealthy. This is when we learn that Ethan is being accused of Purcell's murder, which is not fucking surprising at all because he was doing the absolute most that night. But while they're talking, we also learn that Octavia is dying of cancer. I guess if you have terminal cancer, if it's something that you're not treating, because chemo is what makes you, like, your hair fall out. If you're not doing that, then
I think she says that she's just living at this point.
yeah. She's just living, drinking, being wealthy,
flirting with her son-in-law.
What? Okay, let's keep going.
Look.
So she and Annie have this heartfelt moment talking about her cancer diagnosis. And then Annie and Octavia head to the jail. On the steps, they meet up with Paul, who's Annie's husband, who helps Octavia into the jail and then takes her to the jailhouse cafeteria. I was like, this is all very weird. Because I was like, I don't remember Orleans Parish prison. Like, I don't remember the jail having, like, a fucking gumbo station.
I love this part about movies set in New Orleans because you only eat etouffee and gumbo.
Only. Or crawfish, and they always call it crayfish. Or beignets.
Or beignets. It's like you have that, you got gumbo, and you have jambalaya. Mm-hmm. That's all you eat.
All you eat. But also, I thought that it was really weird that they're allowed to see him at all. They're inside the interrogation room, and Annie and Ethan are talking. Ethan's really going through it. And we and Annie learned that while Ethan had been in law school, a dream that his father had for him, Ethan was expelled months ago. Apparently he hated it. He wasn't doing well. So Annie's like, okay, we'll address that later, but how about we get into what happened last night when you allegedly murdered a man? And Ethan is kind of unlikable. I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of Ethan. He's obviously going through a lot. He's experienced some trauma, but he's kind of like smart alecky, and I don't find that character trait appealing.
In a situation as dire as you being accused of
murdering a man's dead, and you were seen threatening him
moments before he was gutted.
Right. He gives her like a little bullshit response, which is like whatever, but it's like really his face. I hate his face, and that's what's really bothering me. He's just like kind of smug. But even Annie is irritated in this moment because she's like, cut the shit and tell me what the hell happened. Because this is like a serious fucking situation. Now, while all this is happening, we as the audience can see that one of the detectives assigned to the case, Detective Ray Levesque, is on the other side of a two-way mirror because they're in an interrogation room. And he's listening to their conversation when his partner, Detective Pam Carver, storms in and tells him he isn't supposed to be in the room listening to them. It's against the rules. And I'm like, in what fucking world?
In the world of rich people.
We learned that he's not just accused of the murder at this point. Ethan gave a full confession to the murder. He said that he murdered Purcell. So as far as they're concerned...
It's an open shut case.
It is. It's an open and shut case, and there's a murderer sitting in there. Annie is not his legal counsel. I don't know why she's being allowed to see him at all anyway. He's talking to his fucking sister. Of course the police can listen in on this. They read your mail. They listen to your phone calls. What are we talking about? But Ray essentially says he doesn't give a fuck about the rules because he believes that Ethan is a serial killer. So he pulls out all these pictures. He thinks that in addition to murdering Purcell last night, he is also to blame for several other murders. These are just kind of Jane and John Doe's, but they were killed with a hook through the back, just like Purcell. And then just like his father, Levesque also believes that he killed his father, which we as the audience know all of these murders were committed by Candyman.
But Levesque said, I don't care. He's a rich, spoiled white kid, and I want him to pay.
Okay.
Look, everybody gotta have a little character, a little motive going with them. The mama dying, the husband like gumbo, and and Levesque got a chip on his shoulder.
The chip on Levesque's shoulder is fucking, it might as well be a boulder. This man, he hates Ethan. He's like, I'm not gonna let him get away with murder because he's wealthy. He confessed. I'm just like, go sit down somewhere.
You have no work to do.
Well, okay, this is the thing, because I'm gonna talk about this later. Right now, you can chill, right? Just kind of chill for a minute. You're coming on too strong, and like low key, you look like a hater.
Look, sound,
smell. He's coming off as really unlikable. He doesn't like rich people because apparently when he was growing up, I guess he was poor, and he resented all the rich kids who thought they were better than him. And even as an adult, in a position of kind of power, he cannot let the shit go. Because he mentions that they were all in their houses on Esplanade Avenue, and they were like rich, and I don't know how Detective Carver is even listening to this, because I'd be like, if you don't go sit your fucking ass down somewhere and shut the fuck up. But in the interrogation room, Annie really starts to push Ethan because she cannot understand why Ethan would confess to murder. She doesn't believe that he did it.
And also, that's just silly.
That too. She offers to call a lawyer, and he's like, no. She says that she believes that Ethan just wants to be punished even though he didn't do anything wrong. And she also believes that he didn't kill their father. He was just in the house that night. And she says that she's going to find out what really happened. And this is when Ethan stops being polite and starts getting real. He kind of loses it, and he picks up an ashtray, I think, off the interrogation table, and he just launches it through the two-way mirror in the front of the room, causing it to shatter, glass flying everywhere, exposing Levesque on the other side, being a hater.
Oh, goofy ass.
So, of course, they send in the cops to take him away, but as they're dragging him out, he's adamant that Annie just not look into these murders any further, just fucking let it go. So, of course, she's like, well, now I have to look into them.
What will I wear while I'm investigating these murders?
I need to get my investigation outfit from the dry cleaners because I'm getting to the bottom of this. So now, while she's walking out of the police station, Annie is talking to Detective Pam Carver, and Detective Carver tells Annie that as far as they're concerned, it's an open and shut case. Brother made a full confession. And Annie is really the only person in the room with like a fucking brain, because she's like, what fucking evidence do you have? He's saying he did it, yes, but false confessions are a thing. You have no murder weapon. You have no forensics. You have no blood tying him to the scene. Detective Carver says, well, people heard Ethan threaten Purcell, and Annie, who is just a fucking civilian, could obliterate this case in court because she's like, that doesn't prove anything. That doesn't. He was thrown out after he threatened him. He was gone from the bar. I was thinking It's not a big bar at all. There's not a ton of people.
How would he get in the bathroom?
Purcell died literally like 5 minutes later, if that. He got up and walked to the bathroom 3 minutes later. You would have noticed Ethan coming back in. I don't even know if they would have finished throwing him out before Purcell was killed. So I'm just like, when would Ethan have had the opportunity to commit this murder realistically? But yeah, the police are just like, oh well.
Shit.
So then, really thinking that she's doing something, Detective Carver says it's about more than Purcell's death. Ethan was probably connected to your father's death as well. I guess she thought that would like shut Annie up in some way. So how does Detective Carver know this? Well, because they were all killed in a similar fashion. And I was like, girl, if that's all you got, this case is not going to fucking trial. Go sit down somewhere because you really have nothing. So Annie is like, he didn't kill our dad, you dunce. So now we cut to later that night, and Annie is at the restaurant where Paul, her husband, is the chef. Annie is kind of lamenting, thinking that their family is cursed. There's a cloud that's set over their family after their father died. Paul comforts her, and then they head home, where Annie stops to look at some old family photos, and she shows Paul a picture of her childhood home. It's this huge, all-white, kind of colonial mansion. And she says that her father loved the home so much that even after they moved out, he would still drive them past the house because he was just so drawn to it. So this prompts her and Paul to go and visit the house the next day. Now, the house is now abandoned and it has fallen into deep disrepair, but they head inside anyway. And the house, I keep saying house, it's not a house.
The plantation.
It's a plantation.
It's the plantation, y'all.
Yeah, so while they're inside, they stumble upon some squatters. And Paul's like, we really need to get the fuck out of here. But Annie is really set on looking around to find some kind of answers to what happened to Ethan the night that her father died.
Paul's like, we really have to get out of here. But Annie, who also doubles as a character from Hell House, has decided that she's just going to keep everybody around in immediate danger.
There's multiple squatters in here. And they don't want you here. They're like a little bit kind of like aggressive. So what are we doing right now? Annie, we didn't even bring a flashlight. So then they go to Annie's old room. And when Paul goes to admire her view, he really stops in his tracks because I don't think he knew what type of house this was. And he's kind of shook. She's like, oh yeah, those are the slave quarters. That's my scenic view. The slave quarters.
Mom and Paul never let us go in the slave quarters.
Yeah. I mean, so it's like very clear that their home was a plantation. And she's like, oh yeah, we weren't allowed to play in them, but that was my view. And Paul's like, okay, let's get the fuck out of here immediately.
But do people just buy plantations? Aren't they kind of like, if you live in a plantation, it was inherited?
Your family, yeah, I do not believe that they are being sold. I think if you, a person, owns a plantation still, it's because it was your family's. And then if not, it's like a museum type organization like owns it. Or at least runs it, something like that. But Paul, when he's backing away, he ends up tripping on some debris, hurting his ankle. So he has to take a seat. And he's like really adamant to get the fuck out of there. But Annie just continues on alone to the room that her father died in to try to get some answers. So she's heading down some very, very heavily graffitied hallways into this small, like, attic type room.
Mm-hmm.
So inside, there's still a ton of graffiti, including things like Sweets to the Sweet.
Of course.
Of course. There's also portraits depicting Daniel Robitaille's lynching on the walls. It's very, very similar to Cabrini Green. Then she finds this shrine of Candyman. So it's a huge Candyman painted on the wall. There's kind of like an altar type area with a lot of lit candles there. But she doesn't really gain anything from any of this. That's kind of it. That's kind of just like where it stands. So then they leave, and Annie has to go to work.
What time is it?
That's what I said. I was like, does she go to work late? But she gets there. And when she walks in, there is a sub in the room, and she's going through it.
She useless. Because they fighting.
Because they're fighting, yes. But Annie gets there, and she is able to break it up. She's like, what the hell is going on in here? And essentially, the students are pissed at this one kid, Matthew, because he is doing a lot. He made a drawing, essentially kind of depicting Candyman's lynching, and he shows it to Annie.
It's great.
First of all, skill-wise, the kid has a lot of talent. So let's start there. But subject matter, the kids in the class are like, get this crazy asshole out of here. Because they're like, why are you bringing that kind of energy in here? We don't need that. We just came to fucking draw self-portraits on mirrors, and that's it.
In these fake-ass classes, because we're about to go to a parade.
Right. So let's keep it moving. Let's keep it lighthearted in here. Annie is trying to put everyone at ease, and she tells them that there is no such thing as Candyman. It is just a scary story. So one kid asks, well, what about the murders? And she tells them that sometimes people do really bad things, and when they don't get caught, the community starts to blame these imaginary monsters for their crimes. So very, very much a narrative that we've heard in these Candyman movies. But that's all that Candyman is. He is an imaginary monster. So that's when the kids tell her, nah, he's real. And they say, if you say his name in the mirror 5 times, he appears.
Dead ass.
Dante, I was like, if you looked up dead ass in the dictionary, you would see these fucking kids. Because when she's like, you can't really believe that, do you? She scans the room.
Everybody was on mute.
Not a line on their faces. Nobody's smiling. Nobody's smirking. Nobody's like, it's just, there's statues looking at her because they're trying to figure out, like, are you dumb? Like, what are we talking about?
So you dumb.
They're like, I didn't know you were a dumb bitch. I mean, the way that they're looking at her.
Stone face. Everybody just like.
Yes, bitch. That's why we fucking said it. There's not a kid in this class that doesn't believe that Candyman is probably itching to come kill them.
And there were white kids in there too.
There were white kids in there too, yeah.
And they were like, nah.
And they were like, nah, girl.
You on your own.
We can't side with you on this one. We believe he's real. And so she scans the room, and when they're like fucking dead ass, yes, we fucking do.
She's like, I know, I agree. Know what I'll do? I'll summon him.
Y'all, I am so fucking weary. Because why did she do this? Why did she do this? This is what I'm fucking talking about. This is the stupid fuck around and find out that I'm talking about. You're saying this in a room full of these kids. You don't know what's going to happen. Yes, you don't have to believe that he's real. But he's real to these kids, right? So she goes to the mirror. She says the name 5 times like a fucking dummy. So, of course, nothing happens in that moment.
Because it never.
Because it doesn't happen in the moment. They all breathe a sigh of relief, except Matthew, who is standing by the window. He notices a bee appear on the glass. When Annie walks over, she sees it as well, and then it just drops dead. She puts her hands on Matthew's shoulders, and Matthew just taps her hand, and the look on his face is like, it was nice knowing you, because this is obviously a sign.
I just really like that the bee came.
Me too.
That kind of stuff is throughout the movie. There's a lot of scenes and pieces where the lore is really being used. they changed some stuff from the first movie, but there's just parts of this movie where it's like, damn, they're really selling like what we know, the imagery. It's dope, and I think that as one of those like '90s sequels, you don't really think like, oh, it's gonna be like trash, but that stuff is kind of really cool, and you get a lot of that here.
It's a subtle little thing, but it holds a lot of weight because we know what those bees mean.
Right.
Matthew also clearly knows what those bees mean. And then Annie is looking kind of shook too. So when she gets home, she tells Paul, and he's like, I can't believe you really did that.
Because I live here.
Why would you do that? What about me? But then they start fooling around. They forget about it. Later that night, Paul is preparing some late night dessert and wine when in the bathroom, Candyman appears to Annie. He gives, the usual spiel. We've heard this before. I'm the writing on the wall, the whispers in the classroom. And Tony Todd is just as captivating as ever. He looks a little bit different, a little bit more modernized.
You remember when they did Return to Jafar?
Why is that our reference?
Let me tell you why. Because do you remember when they did Return to Jafar? Mm-hmm. And the animation was different? Mm-hmm. The outline drawing was very dark. And because Jafar was the villain in that movie, and also Jafar is kind of a peripheral character within the space of the original Aladdin Return Jafar, he's like all in that bitch. And Tony Todd is really all in this bitch.
Well, yeah. So we discussed this in the first one. Tony Todd does not appear in the first movie until almost an hour into the movie.
And how much screen time was it? It was like 12 minutes or something?
Something very, very small.
Small. But where in this movie, they was like, how many days you got? Because we need them all.
He was in it a lot more, which I appreciate because I felt like Tony Todd's performance was so profound in the first one that you don't even realize that he's barely in that bitch.
In that movie.
It's literally, he is like the thing that people remember for the movie, but he's in it for a matter of minutes.
It's like that with Silence of the Lambs.
It is also like that with Silence of the Lambs. And yes, Hannibal Lecter is the face of that movie. I think he's in it for 11 minutes.
It's 11 minutes of screen time.
So he is in this one a lot more, and his look is a little bit different. It is a little bit more modern. He doesn't have the same coat, but he's still captivating to watch on screen.
Would you say that my Jafar reference was good?
I will give you the Jafar reference. So now Annie starts to, and I felt like this was one thing that they didn't do as good of a job with in this one. Annie, like Helen in the original, also experiences these hypnotic trances. Candyman has a hypnotic effect on both of the
white women.
White women, period. But yeah, so Annie gets into these trance-like states as well, but the camera work in the first movie, and we talk about it a lot in that episode, it's so beautiful. I don't know if it's like the filter they use. I'm sorry, I'm so ignorant on like film, but the lighting, the filter, like what they're able to do, this dreamy, like old classic movie look that they give Virginia Madsen when she is under hypnosis because of Candyman. It's so obvious in the first movie, and it's visually stunning. It is such a treat to look at. They didn't do that in this movie. There are times where she is apparently in this hypnotic state, and I couldn't even tell that that's what they were going for until she kind of came out of it.
I didn't catch it until I saw the tears.
Yes, her eyes will like well up with tears. And I'm just like, I thought that they could have used a little bit more care in that regard, because I don't think the budget for the original Candyman was big at all. And I don't know what the budget was for this Candyman. I know that it's different directors, so maybe the director's skills vary, but that is one thing that I missed from the first movie. But Let's continue. So Candyman proceeds to tell Annie he came for her and they have a journey to make together. He goes to the living room to grab Paul. Annie runs out of the bathroom just in time to see Paul struggling in Candyman's arms before Candyman rams. It's so fucking violent. Candyman rams his hook through Paul's back aggressively. It comes out through his stomach in the front, but he's not done. There's blood shooting everywhere. It gets all over Annie's face, like in her mouth. And then he lifts Paul up off the ground using his hook. And we actually see him. I mean, like, don't talk the talk if you can't walk the walk, but he can definitely walk the walk because he splits Paul from groin to gullet. He takes this fucking hook and just travels all the way up to Paul's sternum. And then when he's done, he just like violently tosses him on the floor. Blood shoots from his mouth. And I was like, damn. I don't know if Paul.
Paul did nothing.
That's what I said. I was like, I don't think Paul deserved to die this hard. That was an aggressive kill. Paul is the second on-screen kill. Rest in peace, Paul.
He's a very vengeful Candyman this time around.
Oh, yes. He is. So Annie is in a rage when she runs up and she ends up scratching Candyman's face, splitting his cheek wide open. But instead of blood pouring out, only bees escape the wound. Now, I do have to say, I feel like I can't not say, be warned, this part of the film uses a combination of Tony Todd's face, but also possibly the worst use of like a prop dummy that I've ever seen in my entire life. And I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't mention it. The dummy that they're using, so they do kind of a close-up of the cheek, but it's not close up enough because you can still see the nose and mouth. It's clearly not Tony Todd. And I hate that they did it this way because I feel like you could have done it on the real Tony Todd and just used like a makeup effect. But they use a dummy head. It's essentially those styrofoam dummies that hairdressers use to like sit wigs on. I swear to you, it is that dummy. And then they just put a place where the cheek could be split open. It doesn't even have nostrils. The mouth does not open. It doesn't split. It's just all one solid thing. That's how it was like, I know that this is like a styrofoam dummy.
I didn't like that.
I didn't like that either.
You remember how like that was such a pivotal scene in the first one where he opens his mouth and all those bees come out?
Yes.
I think they were going for that. They were like, oh, we're gonna remind them, we're gonna let them know who he is. But then it was just like, we got $45.
Yes, like we want to do that exact same thing, except I have some lint, an old bobby pin, some chewed up gum, and a piece of string in my pocket. What can I get with that? And they were like,
you can solve a murder on Forensic Files with that.
You sure can. But in 1995, that would just get you a hairdresser's dummy. It's a brown spray paint, it's a plaster, and they're like, here, call it Tony Todd.
They were like, voila, I call this
Tony Todd. And I was like, it could have been better. Because remember, additionally in the first one, remember when he opens his coat and he has all those bees in his like dead chest cavity?
Uh-huh.
That shit looked good. That looked great. So I know that it's possible to have good makeup effects.
Well, they shot that scene like in a dark room. This is like straight up in lighting. I don't know why they chose this. This was a choice.
This should have been in the dark.
It's in the cutting room floor.
Right, this should have been left in the dark room. But here we are, and they did do it. They committed to it. It did happen. So when you guys see it, Don't think we didn't notice it. We did. It's crazy, but moving on. So Candyman is able to instantly heal his wound. Annie runs off to find safety, but Candyman is teleporting and he beats her to the room because he can. We know that. So he just tells her to join him before Annie ends up falling into a trance and then just kind of passing out. So next we cut to Annie at the police station, meeting with Detective Carver and Detective Levesque. She's explaining everything that happened exactly the way that it happened. And Detective Carver, who is definitely the nicer of these two detectives, is like, girl, I'm trying to work with you here, but I'm having some trouble because she's telling them everything, including the bees coming out of his face. And so they're like, oh, she must be crazy. I don't know that I would react any differently. So Annie is getting extremely frustrated. And she's like, look, he's real. So what does that mean about my brother? And Detective Carver, she's starting to say that there's nothing to suggest that her husband's death is related to her brother's case. And Annie's like, bullshit. Before, you said that your literal only evidence against my brother was that the people were killed in the same way. Then this should be enough evidence, the way that Paul was murdered, to say that somebody else must be the killer.
And they were like,
they're like, well, you know what, bitch? Speaking of, what were you doing last night? What were you when Purcell was murdered? Because Detective Levesque was like, okay, well, if you want to go down that road, and he didn't do it, then that just leaves you, bitch.
and she was like, come again?
She looked at him like he was the fucking, like, a bug on her shoe. And I don't blame her because, Levesque, shut the fuck up. Like, just think. For it, like, does evidence mean nothing to you? Or I guess he's just like, well, if you're rich, you're guilty. Because there's no proof. You have less proof that Annie did it than you do that Ethan did it. She doesn't know Purcell at all from a can of paint.
And I don't like that he. If there was anything with Annie and Ethan that they were trying to get away with things, if they were like unsympathetic characters, if there was spaces where you kind of watch them, use wealth as a means. I mean, Annie's a teacher.
Right, she's an art teacher and is also really likable.
Right.
Annie doesn't reference her wealth ever. Ethan doesn't really either. Ethan is not nearly as likable, but you're right. Detective Levesque is coming off as just kind of an asshole because we like Annie. I'm poor and I think she's sweet, like she's a teacher at a low income public school. So he never gets better either. I am never like, oh, well, he has a point. No, he's not likable. So before they can discuss that any further, Annie's mom, Octavia, shows up and she brings Annie back to her condo. So now Annie is asking her mom a ton of questions about Candyman, like if her dad ever talked about Candyman, what was he doing at their old house that night, and her mom is just like, it's bedtime, bye. She's like, I don't want to talk about that. Octavia then goes downstairs. She sets her alarm system and she ends up going to her bedroom. And we've seen this a couple of times. She has a drawer on her vanity that she keeps locked with a key. It has these pictures inside of it, these old black and white pictures. And so she keeps looking at one picture in particular. It's like a mother and a daughter. And she looks at it, she puts it away, and she just kind of cries alone in her room. So it's just something to remember because it's going to end up coming up later. So now we cut to the next morning, and it is finally Mardi Gras day. Annie wakes up. She goes out on the terrace, and she's looking back to see her mom through the kitchen window. And her mom's preparing tea. Absolutely a breathtaking view. But when she turns back to the window again, Candyman is now standing there. He tells Annie to, quote, swallow her horror and let it nourish her. And I was like, damn. Bars, right? But he's essentially just like, come with me, share this world with me.
Well, the white hole is that.
He's just trying to replace the white woman that he lost back when he was lynched. And so we're getting these flashbacks of her. And of course, I was like, how cool would it have been if they could have gotten Virginia Madsen to like play her in these flashbacks? Because remember, part of the thing in the first movie was that he was so drawn to Helen because she looked exactly like the woman that he was in love with, that he died for. Helen sees her picture in the mural and it's like, it's uncanny. And he's like, it was always you, Helen. And now he's just like, any white woman will do in a pinch. But we're getting flashbacks of the woman that he was with. We're going to learn that her name is Caroline. But we also see a painted portrait of her. So we'll remember that portrait because it comes up later too. But before Annie can really grapple with kind of anything that she's hearing right now, she sees Candyman in the kitchen standing behind her totally oblivious mother. He then slits Octavia's throat as a horrified Annie screams out. But JK, because Annie is awoken by Octavia. It was all a dream. So they have this really heartwarming moment, and Octavia comforts Annie when they're interrupted by a call from their security guard letting them know that somebody is there to see them. It's Annie's students, and they're coming by to check on her. But they also let her know that apparently her student Matthew, the one who's drawing the Candyman portraits, he's disappeared, and the cops can't find him. So Annie ends up heading down to Matthew's kind of, I guess, more impoverished neighborhood to see his father, to offer her help. And she's met with a lot of hostility for some reason by the neighbors, which I hate this kind of trope. I don't like this, where it's like anytime like a white person enters like a black neighborhood, they're always going to be accosted in some way. I hate that they depict black people like that a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I heard you looking for Candyman, bitch.
People
In New Orleans are nice.
People in New Orleans are nice. Like, just straight up.
I'm just fucking nice.
It's very similar when you think about it to Dylan Roof when he went to that black church and he goes in and the people were so warm and so welcoming towards him that even this raging racist, he said that he almost couldn't shoot up this church. He almost couldn't kill these people because he was just like, they were so nice to me.
Human.
Yeah, he could not believe
how human these people are.
Yeah.
But, you know, he's so radicalized by the media that he consumes that he still killed them. We're saying that as locals, like, people in New Orleans are just friendly. They call everybody baby, for Christ's sake.
They do. If you go somewhere acting an ass, they're going to let you know. But if you're just somebody minding your business, if you're somebody coming around to help look for somebody's lost kid, they're not going to treat you this way. And I just don't like this trope. It's like in New Orleans, especially not, but I just think in general, no.
In general, no. And she said, I'm Matthew's teacher, so of course I have vested interest in finding my goddamn student.
Right. What the hell are you talking about right now? It didn't even make sense. So I didn't like it. I didn't like troping just to trope.
I don't like this idea that, like, he's making it like everybody's just so mean to this rich lady.
Right. Because you're rich and you're white, so what are you doing here? You get everything you want all the time. You're going to get away with murder and all this stuff. And it's like, she doesn't exude that energy.
At all. Why are you being like this? And it's not the story, because whereas the first movie, you know, they give so much background into like the social structure of, you know, classism, gentrification, racism. This movie is really almost a revenge plot.
Yeah.
It's so heavily focused on Andy.
Yes. And I can tell that the director
was trying to do something.
Yeah, this screenwriter, he was trying to do a little bit of something. I guess he didn't want people to say that he totally gutted the whole, like, the heart of the Candyman story, which at the heart, it is a social commentary.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he didn't want to just totally remove that. So you do have, the fact that Annie is a rich white woman and she is trying to help low income children. She's going into a low income neighborhood. She works at this type of school, so that is happening in the background. It's just very in the background. It's just kind of like there, as opposed to Candyman, the original, it's very in your face. And if you don't think it is, then you didn't watch the movie right. Yeah. So they tell her to take her teacher ass back to her classroom. But Matthew's father, who is a Reverend Ellis, he shuts all that down and he invites her in because he's a father with a lost child. He wants all the help that he can get. What the fuck are you talking about?
Go back down the street.
Right, just put your flyers up somewhere else. So his father reveals that he never typically let Matthew leave the house alone at night. But this one time he did, this is what happens. But he says the police aren't doing anything because it's just one less black kid, so just one less potential troublemaker on the streets, so they really don't care. He also reveals that ever since Matthew's mother died, he's been having really bad nightmares, so bad that he won't even sleep in his own room anymore. He just stays up all night painting in this little area in their house that Matthew calls his art studio. So when they go into the art studio, they discover a lot of drawings of Candyman. Annie asks the Reverend, what if Candyman is real? And I was like, I don't really know what he was supposed to say to that, but his response is, well, if that's the case, then only God can save us. Which, okay, yeah, heard. Because, yeah, Annie, you kind of brought this
on us.
Yeah, I'm not trying to blame you. I know that you...
Because everybody says he doesn't appear unless you say his name 5 times in the mirror.
Literally. If you go by what happens in the requel, we went like 2 decades without any fucking incident. And then Anthony comes in and just fucking says his name in the mirror 5 times. I feel like it was very clear, just don't do it. And we could have gone another 20 years never seeing him. But here we are.
Seeing him.
Because of you, Annie. So now you're putting us all in danger, Annie. Poor Paul.
That's the thing. That's the thing about Candyman. It's like, no more you say, and everybody around you suffers.
Right. Bless Bernadette. She was like, I'm just trying to be a good friend and also get an A on my thesis. And now she ends up dead. Looking like a fucking sucked dry jelly bean.
She was a bad looking dummy too.
She was she was giving Tales from the Hood, that dummy that they ran out of budget for, so they didn't have like skin colored paint, so just kind of left it dummy colored. Yeah. So while Annie is walking back through the neighborhood, she comes across some kids poking a dead cat with a stick. Apparently, this cat was killed by bees. The kids say the bees got the cat. So then Annie heads to the police station to have a sit down with Ethan, because apparently you could just see a confessed murderer in the county jail whenever you want. No appointments necessary. But she's giving Ethan the rundown of everything that's happened, including the fact that she said Candyman's name in the mirror 5 times. And Ethan's like, his face is like, this
disgusted.
Stupid bitch. Yes, because Annie, on its face, doesn't that sound crazy to you? Like, Annie, let's put our fucking thinking caps on right now. I would be embarrassed to even say that. So he said that he's been trying all this time to protect her and their mom from this, but alas. That's when he reveals that his dad believed in Candyman and then became really obsessed with him and even talked to Ethan about him. He then became obsessed with the idea of summoning him. So Ethan tried to never leave his father alone so that he would never have the opportunity. So that's when their dad decided to head to their old house to call him there. And Ethan had followed him there. When he heard his father screaming, he rushes in to find his father dead on the floor. He just missed the opportunity to save him. And so because of that, Ethan blames himself. He really believes that if he just gotten there 5 minutes earlier, he could have saved his father. None of this would be happening. So that's when Annie asks him, why was their father so obsessed with summoning him? And Ethan reveals that their father believed that he'd found a way to destroy him. So Annie asks, what does our family have to do with this? Which I found to be a really random question.
Very clunky.
It was very clunky. It was poor writing. They really wanted to open this plot line and didn't have a way to do it organically. So she just comes out and asks this question, but it's coming out of left field.
When they could have honestly just had Tony Todd say something.
Right, give her some clue in. But he didn't. Nothing thus far is connecting your family to him. The thing that's connecting y'all to him is that y'all were just the fucking idiots that said his name. So it's just like, I don't know. I thought that was a little clunky, yeah. But Ethan says he doesn't know, but before his death, their dad had been dealing with a black market dealer named Thibodeau who lives in the French Quarter. So Ethan says that he thinks he might have some answers, but he tells her to wait until he's out to talk to him. But Annie decides to go alone because who says you're getting out? First of all, that's so fucking cocky. You confess to murder. But then she's like, a nicer reason is that Ethan is probably safest in jail anyway because there's somebody always watching him. So
Right.
Candyman's not just going to get him.
Even though he's a ghost, he doesn't give a shit.
And we're going to see that this is so fucking inaccurate. It's not even funny. Now we're heading down to Thibodeau Snowball Stand. So this is Honoré Thibodeau.
They throw it in New Orleans. They could throw it.
Right. And so Thibodeau owns a snowball stand.
Driest snowballs I ever seen.
I was
No juice.
not impressed.
No juice.
I was like, it's probably because he's using all his juice at some freaky shit. Because when she walks up, he's doing some freaky shit with a lady and some juice. I was like, what's happening right now? So Annie orders her cherry snowball.
It's dry, no juice.
It was very dry. I was like, it probably didn't even get all the way to the bottom, but okay. So when he's handing it to her, he says sweets to the sweet. And I was like, why did he say that?
There's no scene in this movie where that's said, where it comes natural.
No, it doesn't, Dante. No, it fucking doesn't. That is so funny because you are absolutely right. You are on the fucking money. Because every time it's said, I'm like, okay.
Sweets for first of all, they don't even sound like some people say.
No, it doesn't. So I was like, this is kind of awkward. So Annie knows this is the guy, Honoré Thibodeau. He agrees to speak with her when she reveals that her father, Coleman Tarrant, has been murdered. Annie is unaware of this, but we as the audience can see that she is being tailed by police this whole time. So Detective Levesque and another officer are following her, and they watch her enter the snowball stand. It's not just a stand, it's a stand that's attached to like his house. They go into his house. So inside, Thibodeau takes Annie to a hidden room that he has. So this is where all his black market stuff is hidden. And he reveals a portrait of a woman holding a small mirror. This portrait is of Candyman's great lost love. We saw her earlier. It's Caroline Sullivan. Thibodeau tells her that her father found out that Candyman was born in New Orleans. So that's adding some new stuff to the lore. And her father was searching for the mirror that Caroline is holding in her portrait because people believe that Daniel Robitaille's soul escaped the day that he was murdered, and it went into Caroline's little handheld mirror. So her father believed that if he could break this mirror, then he could break the curse. While he's explaining all of this to her, he starts to notice that there are bees appearing around the shop. When he follows the bees to the source, there's a ton of bees on top of something that's covered in a sheet. So he rips the cover off of the sheet, and of course, Candyman is there. And from this guy's reaction, I was like, I can't believe he didn't die on the spot. He's scared as fuck. I'm surprised he didn't go into cardiac arrest. And I don't blame him, because this shit is scary. Because Candyman will never appear for a chat. He's never gonna appear to like hash out your differences.
Get a snowball.
He's not coming for the dry snowballs. Candyman stands up. He reveals his torso full of bees. When the bees fly out, they start to swarm Thibodeau. So now Thibodeau is screaming on the ground in pain. This alerts Detective Levesque, who breaks into the building to try to find them. But it's taking him a minute because they're in Thibodeau's secret art smuggling room, so he can't quite pinpoint where they are. Now, meanwhile, with Thibodeau screaming in the background, Candyman is chatting with Annie. He's telling her something she didn't know. She's actually pregnant, and he's saying that they need to be together, essentially to be a family. This is kind of like the same thing that he was trying to achieve in the first movie as well, with baby Anthony and Helen. So when Thibodeau musters the strength to step in, he stands up, still covered in bees, and he approaches Candyman. But Candyman, he just picks him up and he throws him like a fucking horseshoe just straight through the side of the house. It's so crazy. He goes through the metal plating on the side of this building and he's fucked up. I mean, he's dumb fucked up. He's dead. So on the outside, Detective Levesque sees him come through the side of the building, and he uses the hole made by his body to break through into this secret room. But Annie has already run out.
He can't imagine this man through a wall.
Let's be real here. Let's put our thinking caps on.
Right the hell now.
The way that this man went through the wall, it's just not fucking feasible. Annie's not a big woman. She's actually pretty petite. But now Annie is running and Candyman is hot on her heels. So she ends up running to a motel. And she locks herself in one of the rooms and immediately strips off her clothes and jumps in the shower. This was silly. And it was, in my opinion, gratuitous because there's a few times in this movie that they kind of throw in gratuitous shots because I've never in my life, in my 30 plus years, and I'm sure that it's happened, but I'm pretty sure it's extremely rare. I never see people having sex totally naked on the streets during Mardi Gras. we still have to follow the law during Mardi Gras. Like, I'm just like mad confused. But that happens a couple of times throughout the movie, and everybody's just like okay with this. Like, there's kids running around, people are at parades, and there's just people totally naked, except in like Mardi Gras mask, having sex. Gratuitous. Annie running for her life from this person that is a ghost and can appear anywhere, for you to strip off all your clothes and jump into the shower in a motel room for nothing is like gratuitous to me, because they film her in the shower and they have the camera kind of pan down her body. She looked good, but it was unnecessary.
Because whose hotel was this?
She didn't even pay. She just went into a motel room. She just ran into a motel room and immediately took all of her clothes off. And I was like, well, what if he pops up here? Now you're naked. So now the entire time that she's in the shower naked, so she's having flashbacks to the day that Daniel Robitaille was lynched. And she is really racking her brain trying to figure out what their connection is.
Why is she having these?
Why is she having these flashbacks? I don't know.
Isn't that weird? Because she's not touching anything. She's not having a premonition.
No. At this point, I don't believe that they've touched either.
And when they do touch, it's a very big deal that he's like, take my hand.
Yes. But she just like seeing she has a lot of flashbacks. She sees a lot of his life just kind of on repeat, and she's gaining insight using memories that she shouldn't have. I don't really know why she has these, but okay. So then Annie goes to Matthew's father, Reverend Ellis, who reveals that he knew that Daniel Robitaille was born in New Orleans. And he ends up taking her to the registrar of all the slave births in the area. I don't know why he has this, but he does. He has immediate access to these historical documents. But okay. So Annie realizes that Daniel Robitaille was born at the Esplanade Plantation, aka her family's home. So Reverend Ellis ends up taking her to a cemetery to get a little bit more insight. So this is the cemetery where Daniel Robitaille's body was buried, as well as Caroline Sullivan. Their graves are located right next to each other. And that's when she finds out that Caroline Sullivan also had a daughter named Isabel.
It's not weird to people that he was buried.
I thought it was weird that he has a grave in New Orleans.
It's an hour into the movie.
Yeah. Kind of towards the end of the movie, they start to just kind of, they're throwing a lot at us. A lot of information, a lot of stuff that has lore implications. It's just like a lot of lore being thrown at us, and it's like some of it works, but some of it doesn't quite work, but they're just throwing it. So yeah, he's buried in a New Orleans cemetery. So meanwhile, at the police station, Detective Levesque is losing it, and I've already said that he's like an extremely unlikable character, but it's just like he's reached a fever pitch at this point, and he's really roughing up Ethan, and he's really angry, and he's alleging that Ethan's been covering for his sister this whole time, which you don't have any evidence to suggest that either one of them are involved in either of these crimes.
And how would he cover if now Paul is dead and he was in jail? You're just dumb, because how did this small petite woman throw a grown man through a wall?
Like, you don't think there's any other explanation for anything that's been happening? And he's so annoying because he's so dumb.
She used her rich money powers.
Right. I was very over this character at this point, which was right on time, but so when Ethan says that it was Candyman, that's when Detective Levesque decides that he's going to summon Candyman in the two-way mirror.
I mean, why not? Everybody else is.
I mean, yeah, I guess. It's like he's so fucking dumb and so obnoxious. It's like everything about him is like making my skin crawl right now.
Mm-hmm.
So he stands there, he does it. And of course, Candyman, I mean, almost immediately appears behind him, kills him, plunging his hook in his back. He's picking him up off the ground while Ethan is cowering in a corner. And he ends up throwing him through a window, and his body flies 2 stories down and lands on another cop's desk.
That lady is traumatized.
That is an understatement because not only did he land on a desk, she sits there for a minute in utter shock. And then it's like the more you look at it, the crazier his body looks because a hook went through his back and out his stomach. I mean, it's insane. She probably quit. I'm sure she never went back.
Have you working on Mardi Gras?
I know. So that is the third on-screen death. So now an officer is, of course, running to the room to figure out what happened. Ethan's in there. They think he killed him. And when he opens the door, Ethan runs out, absolutely terrified, because for all we know, Candyman's still in the room. But this is when an officer orders him to stop. He doesn't, because he's scared. And he ends up shooting Ethan in the back and killing him. And it's not a Candyman kill, but it is the fourth on-screen death. So Detective Carver ends up going back to review the footage from the camera that was in the interrogation room. And it doesn't show Candyman. It's obviously very similar to the hospital footage in Helen's case. You can't see Candyman on the camera, even though we know that he was there. But it does show Detective Levesque being killed by some invisible force, while Ethan is cowering in a corner. I mean, really proving that Ethan did not do this. So meanwhile, Annie has snuck into her mother's condo, and she snuck up to her bedroom, and she ends up going through that drawer of photos that her mom always keeps locked. It's full of pictures, and one of those pictures is of, it's written on the back, Caroline and her daughter Isabel when Isabel was 8 years old. Now Annie knows that her mother has been lying and decides to confront her. I didn't like this scene either. I thought that this was a little wonky writing because I kind of felt like up until this point, we really weren't given enough background, or they didn't lay enough groundwork for the amount of like anger that Annie is exuding, because Annie is like talking to her mom like this is like an ultimate betrayal, like you've been lying to us our whole lives. And it's like, I don't like, about what, you know what I mean? Like, it's just
Because, well, many people passed. She was realistically white.
well, let's go through what she's talking about. So she confronts her mom, and so when she does, it's revealed that Caroline bought the plantation, the S.28 plantation, because that's where Daniel Robitaille was born, and that's where she decided to raise their daughter Isabel. Isabel would of course be biracial because Caroline is white, Daniel Robitaille was black, and Isabel was Annie's mother, Octavia's grandmother, so Annie's great grandmother. She was raised as a white child, and nobody ever knew the connection. That is until Annie's father found out about the connection. So they get into a screaming match with Annie calling her mother a liar. First of all, I guess my thing is like, how can Annie be so certain that her mom even knows that they're connected? You know what I mean? It's like Annie just comes at Octavia really, really hard, and I'm like, they didn't lay enough groundwork for me to believe that this argument is realistic.
And what exactly are you mad at? Because you're the one who called Candyman.
So she's telling her that they're Daniel Robitaille's family, and she can't just wash him away with a bottle.
A bottle of what?
Octavia's an alcoholic. She's been drinking the whole movie. But Octavia is like, I was trying to protect my children. Why would I want our family's name to be associated with a monster? And I'm like, all of those things are extremely valid because we know that when Candyman is summoned, he's summoned to kill. And it comes up later, but Candyman is like, I wasn't born a monster. I wasn't always this way. I was turned this way. But regardless, he was turned this way. I don't understand where her animosity is coming from. And I cannot blame Octavia for not wanting to be the family of Candyman, for everybody to know that.
I didn't like this, but I guess they needed to have a pinnacle moment of reveal. They wanted a reveal.
Yes, he wanted a reveal, and it is a reveal, but it is not an earned reveal because he didn't lay the groundwork well for this. I don't think the writing is very well. There's just nothing to suggest that Octavia knows anything about this, and then boom, all of a sudden Annie's like confronting her, and she's like so mad at her that she is like disgusted with her mom, and all of a sudden she's like, we're Daniel Robitaille's family, we're his blood.
Whoa! He's a distant relative.
He would be her great great grandfather. I think that what Annie's issue is that Daniel Robitaille's family like abandoned him. And I'm like, yeah, fucking
Yeah.
John Wayne Gacy's family abandoned him too. He's a bad person.
He did get abandoned, but also they were never going to be a family.
But that's not even what she's saying.
Okay, I'm missing it.
She's saying Octavia abandoned him as in they're abandoning his memory. They're not acknowledging that he was a part of their family. And that's a bad thing.
For me, that just... What the hell is she talking about? Like,
Dante, I am right there fucking with you. What the hell is she talking about? Because I'm like, you're going really fucking hard. For one, you don't even know for sure that Octavia really knew about this. And then I guess she's like, well, her father discovered the secret. I don't know how. I don't know how. Maybe I guess the same way that she did. But then he was like, well, I'm going to break this curse. And then he got killed. And that's somehow your mom's fault. What are we talking about right now? So at this point, Octavia is just kind of like over it. And she's like, Candyman doesn't exist. And so she's really in for a shock because that's when Candyman appears behind her. And for some reason, now he's upset with Octavia because she doubted him, her own flesh and blood. So he kills her. So he hooks her through the back while Annie just kind of does absolutely nothing. So he then tells Annie that it's almost time for them to be together.
okay, that's gross at this point.
Yes, it is.
These last 12 minutes have been so crazy for me.
It is because Daniel Robitaille would be her great great grandfather.
Yeah, he'd be a great grandfather. Even if he was her great cousin.
Anything that you have to distinguish which member of the family it is for you, it's off fucking
weird.
limits. Yeah, no. I mean, he wants them to be together.
What the white holes?
And it's like, I guess he's treating it as though it's Caroline's descendant and he was with Caroline in that life. But no, it's a descendant of both of you. Caroline had your baby, and this is a descendant of that baby. That's when Candyman essentially tells Annie that she can't fight fate. But before Octavia dies, she sets off her house alarm, which draws the police to the condo. She tells Annie that she is so sorry, and she dies. And she is the 5th on-screen kill. So now, with the police there beating down the door, Annie has to make a quick escape through the back door because she is wanted for murder.
Twice.
Right. But as she's heading downstairs, she's met on the back stairs by Detective Carver. Detective Carver tells Annie what a blow. Ethan's dead. And she relays the circumstances around that, but she also tells Annie that she watched the evidence tape of what happened in the interrogation room when Detective Levesque was killed, and she knows for a fact that it was not Ethan. It was some kind of powerful entity.
Because Ethan was pissing in the corner.
Literally. She then sends Annie running so that she can escape. So Annie runs out past a crazy Mardi Gras parade, and she runs straight to the old Esplanade plantation home to try to find the mirror, because she is going to try to end this once and for all. So while she's running through the house, she ends up running into Matthew, who's been hiding there. He tells her that he knew that Candyman would come when she called him, because fucking obviously. That's when she tells him she needs to find the mirror. And I'm really, really unsure as to how Matthew would know what she's referring to.
There's 15 minutes left in the movie, Ruth. Just let it be.
I know.
At some point, I was just like, okay, so he has set up, the writer, has set up these pieces. And now they have to fall into place. And the only way they can fall into place is if that characters have either had conversations
That we're not privy to?
that we're not privy to, or the lore of Candyman and every piece of it is just public knowledge.
Yes. Okay. Yes. That's the only way it works.
Okay.
Okay. So she tells him they need to find the mirror. They run off to the slave quarters because they determine that that's where the mirror must be. And for some reason, it is there. It's propped up in the wall. And there are also skeletons hanging. Why are there skeletons?
Because it's a scary movie.
Dante! So it's like crazy skeletons like attached to the ceiling and like attached to the walls. And I was like, okay, what the hell is going on right now? But okay, let's just keep going, because if we stopped to nitpick everything that was wrong in these last 15 minutes, we would be here all fucking night. Because it gets
biblical.
It gets really fucking crazy. So let's try to power through it. So Annie sends Matthew to go get some help. She's gonna want her to get the mirror. I didn't mention, but it is very important. It's storming outside right now.
All of a sudden,
it's raining. It's Mardi Gras night, people out in the streets, but it's also a torrential rainstorm. So she goes to pick up the mirror, but that's when Candyman appears, asking her not to destroy the mirror because it's the secret of his strength and the keeper of his soul. He tells her that instead of doing that, she should embark on their journey together. He then tells her he wasn't always this way, but he became a monster after everything that was done to him. And his only sin was loving Caroline and giving her a daughter. So it's at this point that he and Annie touch, and he's essentially showing her and us the events of that day in as much detail as we've gotten thus far in the movies. So he tells her to be his witness and see how he became a reflection of their hatred. He really shows the chase. He shows them cutting off his hand with a saw. They get the honey, they spread it on him, and then they have this moment where they show that some of the honey that they're smearing on him, it like lands on a kid's cheek and the kid eats it, and then the kid just says Candyman, and everybody thinks that's the funniest shit that they've ever heard in their entire lives.
And then this bitch.
Well, so then they all start chanting, taunting, calling him Candyman. And then I just thought this was so fucking... Dante, this was so random, I almost laughed. Because this homely hoe that's standing in the fucking audience, she just yells out, "Sweets to the sweet."
And I was like... The thing is about this scene is that it really shows like the depravity
Yes.
of these people, but it's lost in the sauce.
I agree. It's a good scene, except for the fact that I hate that the kid, this little country kid. I didn't like the lady doing the sweets to the sweet. I just felt like they were, what am I, just forcing it a little. You didn't have to put the sweets to the sweets in there. Not every single thing that we've learned about him has to be neatly explained.
And put a pause there because some of y'all was like, dang, why don't you like Halloween 2007? But it's that kind of stuff that I don't like about the movie. That you have to explain everything. The mask has to have an origin. The goddamn suit has to have an origin. Everything is, well, they have it in the movie, in the original, so now I'm going to bring it back again. That's the kind of stuff I don't like. It's that, we got to shoehorn it in. We got to make sure they remember that this is what it is. When it's like, it's on the wall, dope, cool.
Right.
But every time they say it in the movie, I'm like, no one would say that.
It doesn't fit. It never fits. And I was like, I'll accept the Candyman thing because it's like a childish thing that this kid said. And it's just like these people are so far removed from just how gory and horrendous the scene is that's being
and what they're
said.
Doing.
Yes. And so they all laugh and they just think it's like kind of a light-hearted joke. And it came from a kid. I'll accept that. But the sweets to the sweet thing, I was like, okay. But she says this, everybody's giggling, having a good time, and this is right before Daniel Robitaille is overcome by a swarm of bees. Overcome. And in this one, they don't put the bees on him. It's like God sends the bees. Like, the bees come from fucking nowhere.
Is that why the people start to look like weirded out by this happening?
There is a moment where they're kind of like, what's happening?
They're like, wow, this is really sad. And I'm like, y'all did this.
I don't know. Maybe they weren't expecting. I don't know what the hell were you expecting to happen? They put the honey on him. This fucking biblically large swarm of bees comes and like lights his ass up. And then they look bad. And for a minute, I was like, okay, they look kind of remorseful. But then the bees are gone and they double down on it. So I was like, what was the point?
Because it's about to get crazy.
It's about to get crazy. So when the bees leave, he looks atrocious.
It's messy. That's gross.
It's a little gross. He's laying there. He's in unbearable pain, which I believe you because he looks a mess. And Caroline is looking on, distraught. People are holding her back. And that's when Caroline's father, so instead of burning him, like we've gotten in the lore, instead, Caroline's father picks up a mirror. It's a handheld mirror. And he shows Daniel Robitaille his reflection in the mirror. And he's basically like, you're so fucking nasty. He's like, do you think Caroline can even look at you anymore? Because you
busted.
You look dusty. Your hair is uneven. You're not that cute. So he's really like shitting on him, and that's when Candyman looks into the mirror and he just kind of whispers out Candyman, and he dies, and his soul apparently escapes into the mirror. So he's dead, and Caroline runs up, grabs the mirror, and she runs off with it. And she looks in it, and she can still see his reflection in the mirror. So that's how she knows that he's, like, trapped in there. And, like, the rest is history. So then we're cutting back to him and Annie, and he promises Annie that if she joins him, they will go to a place where there's no more pain. And she's really almost tempted by this, lulled into the idea. She's kind of hypnotized right now, and what flashes through her head is her father's dead, her husband's dead, her mom died, her brother's dead. She really has nothing. And just before she's about to give in, she remembers her baby. And this is when she decides that she has to live for her baby. She has to finish this. So she decides to grab the mirror. But that's when, because of the torrential rain outside, a massive fucking flood hits the slave cabin, pulling her and Candyman underwater. But her students show up. Matthew was able to gather help just in time to pull her up before she drowns.
Very set up like the fire in the first one.
It's exactly like the fire in the first one, but this time it's water. So she sees the mirror floating in the water, and she goes back because she wants to retrieve it because she has to break it to end all of this. But when she's doing that, that's when Candyman appears, and he's like, bitch, do you think a little water can stop me? I'm a fucking ghost. And so he just like lifts up out of the water. He's like standing on the water. And she can't believe it. And I'm like, why?
He's dead. Girl.
And it's like the fire in the first one was understandable because he died by fire. So it would make sense that he would be afraid of fire. This is just a little water. So he's like, you know what, bitch? At this point, you don't have a choice. You're coming with me.
He said it in his Tony Todd voice, everybody, but...
Yeah, I mean, he said it a little bit more eloquently than I did, but that was the gist of what he was trying to say. But surprise to surprise, because Annie has the mirror, and she smashes it.
Y'all.
Wait.
I'm not ready to discuss.
So it causes Candyman to break apart. Pieces start falling off, and then he just explodes into a million pieces like broken glass, making him the 6th on-screen kill.
Wasn't it like, you remember in Freddy's Dead?
I was gonna say, do you remember in Wishmaster? The scene in Wishmaster with Kane Hodder, he's a fucking security guard, and the djinn comes, and he literally, I mean, it's like the exact same death. He literally turns him into like glass and just like fucking shatters him into a million pieces. Now, y'all, once again, I do have
it looks bad.
Dante, I'm trying to ease into it.
Oh, I thought you were about to give me an excuse. Sorry.
No,
okay, okay.
I'm not. I'm trying to ease into it. I was going to say, we do have to say that the effects here are
dismal.
They leave a lot to be desired. So when he first starts breaking apart, all I could think about was like, you know those episodes of like, is this cake? Where it's like they're just cutting into random things and they're like, is it a cake or is it a tennis shoe? And it's a cake. That's what it looks like, because it's like, is it a cake or is it Candyman? Because they're cutting off slices of him and it looks like a strawberry filling. It doesn't look natural at all. Pieces are falling off, like half of his face falls off, like a hand falls off. Kind of crazy looking, but then he explodes into a million pieces, and I can't tell which looked worse, but it didn't look good.
That reminded me more of like Animorphs.
Stop. When he first starts, it's like, because he freezes, and then
he's free, and it's like an outline goes around his body out, and his fingernails turn clear, like they like have a blue tint to it. It's crazy. It's like, why did they pick this?
Why? But I'm like, when y'all were in the writer's room, if you knew that you didn't have the budget, just say that. Write something else. Pick something else. Why would you waste our fucking time? This is the climax of the movie. Like, this is when the big bad is beaten, and this is what you chose to do?
That's why I was saying Freddy's Days. I was like, that was the last one, and they was like, this how y'all gonna kill him off? This looks stupid.
Mad disrespect. I don't really know what to say, but he's dead. So we cut to the next morning. It's Ash Wednesday, and Matthew and Annie have made it to Reverend Ellis's church, and they're getting blessed and getting their ashes placed on their foreheads. And they kind of walk off into the sunset, dirty, funky, nasty, but alive.
Because it's the farewell to the flesh.
Yes. So it's like they're being reborn again. Everybody's safe. Everybody's happy. They can move on with their lives.
Yeah.
So now we cut to 5 years later. Annie has had her baby. She named her Caroline. And they're looking through a family photo album. And Annie is telling Caroline about all of her relatives, including Isabel and Isabel's father, Daniel Robitaille. She tells Caroline Daniel's name and their relation to him, but that's all that she says about him because she says that she'll tell Caroline more when she's older. But that's when Annie lays Caroline down for a nap. And I fucking hated this part.
Because it's so strange.
It's extremely strange. For some reason, Annie's daughter sits up in her bed. She has a little mirror above her bed. It's like those carousels that people hang above baby beds. One is like a glass, it's a mirror. She takes it and she looks into the mirror and she starts saying Candyman 5 times. Why the fuck would she do that?
Why would she know that?
Why would she know that? I was like, y'all really thought y'all were about to do something. Y'all thought this was cute. You thought it was a good idea. This is the dumbest thing that you put in this whole movie because she's fucking 5. And they apparently hadn't even talked about Daniel Robitaille until this moment because when they turned to his page, Caroline's like, who's that? I was like, this is really, really, really egregiously dumb. I don't like this. It's not fun to me because she would have no way of knowing anything about Candyman. She's fucking 5. She says it 4.5 times before Annie runs up and stops her and tells her to take her ass to bed. And then we see Annie's face and she's looking at her a little concerned, and that's when the screen cuts to black and the credits start to roll.
That was Candyman too.
That was Candyman too. So kill count is 6. The Rotten Tomatoes is a 22% critic and a 30% audience.
That's mean.
Well, it has a 5.2 out of 10 with 14,000 reviews on IMDb. So, fun facts. So, Bernard Rose actually conceived a sequel to Candyman. He wrote the script for it. It was rejected. And they asked him to not return because his idea for the franchise was to not feature Candyman. He wanted to pull a John Carpenter, and instead he wanted to continue to explore the nature of urban horror myths and just kind of have somebody new, I guess, have some new scary thing. And the producers were like, fuck no. They're like, not only are we not accepting that script, we're not even giving you the opportunity to write another one. Get the fuck out of here. So they kick him out. And they were like, audience want to see Candyman show up and eviscerate his victims.
Do they though? Because
Okay. But I was like, damn, that's crazy.
But that's so ahead of your time. That's because you are a true artist. You're a true storyteller, you know.
Well, yeah, it kind of works though a little bit better with John Carpenter because
The name of the movie is not Michael Myers.
yes, that's what. Like I feel crazy as hell if I went to see a movie named Candyman and they're like, it's the Boston Strangler, and I was like, wait, what the fuck? I thought we were gonna see Candyman.
Movie theater.
So I was just like, damn, this is like really weird. His thought. I mean, I get it. I get what you're saying, Bernard
What you're
Rose.
saying is cool, but the name of the franchise is Candyman.
Right. So producers were like, nice try, buddy.
You want that stuff.
Yeah, get out of here. So I don't have like a ton of fun facts about this movie. There's not a ton out there. It's pretty old, and so that's kind of standard, but there was a lot of controversy around the poster that was used to advertise for this film. So this movie came out in 1995 when they were starting to push the movie, it was during the O.J. Simpson trial. It was still very public. It was still ongoing.
Now that's the real where the white hole was at.
Well, yes. So wait, the original poster it was like a black man stalking a white woman, and it was quickly scrapped.
They was like, hell to the no.
They were like, absolutely not. They were like, you're not about to get us canceled. So it was so controversial, they kind of got rid of that idea. And that's why the cover art for this movie is kind of just like Annie with like beehive around her. I thought that was interesting.
That had to be a fucked up time to put this movie out.
Right. Oh man. That might be another reason that it didn't fucking do good.
Do well.
Yeah. So, final fact. So there's a scene in the movie where Annie first arrives to her mom, Octavia's house, and she's drinking, and Annie asks, does Dr. Loomis allow you to drink? So Octavia's primary care physician is named Dr. Loomis, which is obviously a reference to Donald Pleasance's character in Halloween in all the sequels.
Had he died at that point?
I don't know. I'm not exactly sure when it came out in 95.
The movie came out in March 17th, 1995. So he wasn't dead yet.
But yeah, that is all that I have for fun facts.
I wanted to read you this quote from the director, from Bill Condon, when he talks about this movie. He was like, it's hard to be lower on the totem pole than being the director for a sequel to a horror movie.
Ouch.
I know.
Okay. I mean, a sequel to a horror movie can be good if you do it right.
You're the one who put them graphics in.
Right. But with all that being said, what do you think? Do you think this movie is a hit or a miss?
Oh, the movie's a hit.
Okay.
And let me tell you why I think it's a hit. Because I was going back and forth with it. Is it a good movie? Sometimes, yes. What they started with and what they were trying to do would be the makings of a good movie. It gets clunky because I think what happens to it is there's too many plot points.
Agree.
And so then what happens is it's an hour into it and you're like, oh damn.
Yes.
So they gotta wrap it up. But I like sequels.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are parts of it that are cool. There's lore to it that I enjoyed, and I had a good time watching it. I wish that I know we talked about before in the podcast, like we don't like movies to be too long, but this movie probably needed like 10 or 15 more minutes of screen time to really flesh out, no pun intended, everything that they wanted to do with the movie. But all in all, I enjoy it. I think as a horror movie sequel, especially those horror movie sequels of the 90s, get a lot of bad reps, but I think it's a good time. Is it as good as the first one? No. Is it, as shot as nice? No. Is the screenwriting as clear? No. But Tony Todd is really just as interesting, and you get a lot more of him. So I would definitely check it out. I think all in all, it's a decent entry into a franchise.
Okay. Excellent.
Your turn.
I am not sure. I am very much on the fence about what I want to give it.
It's hard.
It's very hard. I don't know. I think overall, I think I'm going to give it a miss. And I hate to say that because I agree with you. There are a lot of fun aspects to the movie. I think Tony Todd's always great. I love seeing Tony Todd on screen. I hope to see him in more things. I think that Annie was a good character. I think that her character was well acted. I think that she was very sympathetic. I love seeing New Orleans on film.
Mm-hmm.
I love the setting of it, obviously, because I love New Orleans. I just found that the writing was not nearly as good. I feel like they didn't take their time. Bernard Rose really took his time with the original. I feel like he cared a lot about it. I feel like there was a lot of effort put into it.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a very well put together story that combined a lot of nuance. It had a lot of social commentary while also juggling, being really scary with also being really beautiful, like visually stunning. I thought the camera work was really good. And I think with this one, it's like the plot is not tight. It's like they didn't put nearly as much care into the script, I believe, and I think it shows.
Oh, yes, it does.
Yeah, it's like you couldn't have put a lot of love and care into it because there's so many plot points that feel rushed and incomplete. They don't do a good setup of certain things, so they're not really laying the groundwork for things the way that I feel like they should. And maybe you're right. Maybe if it had been 10 or 15 minutes longer, they could have kind of tightened that up a little bit. But it's like you don't have the tight script. You're kind of flimsy on the social commentary. You didn't really commit to anything. You just kind of put it in the background in order to say that you did it because it was such a big deal in the first one. So I thought that was kind of like a fail. And additionally, it's not nearly as visually stunning as the first one. So it's also not even really good like cinematography. If you don't have the budget for great effects, don't give us something that looks like his ending. I'm like, that's how Candyman died. I don't like that. That really rubbed me the wrong way. So it's missing everything that made the first one great except for Tony Todd. And I was like, Tony Todd can only carry so much weight on his back. You know what I mean? Like he carried this movie. And it's like, yeah, I do like Annie, but I prefer Virginia Madsen. I don't know. I just feel like it kind of fell flat in certain areas that made the first one really, really good. I think everybody should watch it. I think it's fun. I like to watch it. I just think that it fell short in the most important areas. And I hate to shit on it because I hate to shit on any Tony Todd project. But yeah, that's how I feel.
But don't feel bad because I don't like the Final Destination movies, so we'll get to that.
Controversial. So, do you want to tell them about the social media?
So once again, 321 Ghost, thank you so much for listening, but also recommending this movie and letting us have a little stroll down memory lane, thinking about our hometown. It was really, really fun. And to everyone else who may be listening and have ideas for future podcast episodes, we are always willing to hear you out. We are very active on our Instagram, which is Did You Get That on Film, as well as our Facebook and our YouTube channel. And those are all Did You Get That on Film. In addition to that, we do have our email, Did You Get That on Film at gmail.com.
So, with that being said, we will see you guys again next week with a brand new listener requested episode.
Ooh, and I think we already posted. Do you know where it's going to be?
Yes. So next week will be Saw.
Yeah.
From a very, very special
listener. Yeah.
So we're very excited for that one. So we will see you then.
Bye.
Bye.